Alrighty, welcome back to another state test video. Today we are talking about standard S.ID.5. Let's jump right in. An analyst researches the relationship between different energy sources in each state. For 2014, the data in the table shows the number of states that use coal and nuclear power as an energy source. Given that a state does not use nuclear power, what percentage of those states use coal? So, when we talked about two-way tables, we talked about needing totals, and we do need totals here. So unfortunately, they don't provide us a total column or a total row, so we're going to have to just construct our own total row here. Okay, so I'm just going to put T, I'm going to put T. I'm going to have to figure out my own totals. Okay, so 16 plus 20. Is 36. Ooh, that does not write well. 2 plus 12 is 14. 36 plus 14 is 50. 16 plus 2 is 18. And 20 plus 12 is 32. Okay, so now that we figured out totals, and anytime that it doesn't give you totals, I want you to make totals. Okay? Given that a state does not use nuclear power, okay, so we're working only with states that do not use nuclear power. So this is out of 32. Because we have 32 states that do not use nuclear power. Given that a state does not use nuclear power, what percentage of those states use coal? So of those 32 states that do not use nuclear power, 20 of them use coal. You just have to figure out the percent of that. So we can do that via the TI-30 calculator we use in class, or we could do it via Desmos. 20 divided by 2, or divided by 32. You may be able to put percent. Nope. Okay. 20 divided by 32 is 0.625. And then remember to convert that to a decimal. You grab its decimal point, move it over 2 spots to the right to go from a decimal to a percent. You get 62.5%. 62.5. All right, question 2. Casey asks a random sample of students at his school about their natural hair and eye colors. The results of his survey are shown in the relative frequency table. In the sample, there are 4 more students with brown hair and blue eyes than blonde hair and blue eyes. How many total students have black hair? Oh boy. Okay, so there are 4 more students with brown hair and blue eyes. So that means that 12.5% of people have brown hair and blue eyes. And there are 4 more students than that have brown, blah, blah, blah. There are 4 more of those students than there are students with blonde hair and blue eyes. So blonde hair and blue eyes, bam, is 7.5%. Okay. So, what does that tell me? It says that the difference between these two is 5%. Okay? So that means that 4 people make up 5% of the data. So what can we do with that information? Well, with that data, we can actually find out how many total people took the survey. Because if 4 people make up 5%, to go from 5 to 100 requires multiplying by 20. We can then multiply 4 by 20 to get 80. 80 people took the survey. If 4 people make up 5% of the survey, then 80 people is the total 100%. So we now know that 80 people have taken this survey. Now, how many total students have black hair? Well, black hair, total students. is 25%, or 0.250. There's two ways you could do this. Either in Desmos, you could do 80 times 0.250, which will give you 20, or you could do 25% of 80, which will also tell you 20. Either way you slice it, the answer is 20. Requires a little bit of reverse engineering, a little bit of problem solving, a little bit of logic to get to that point. But you can get there. Question 3. Alton studies the growth patterns of sassafras trees and yellow birch trees in the 88 counties in Ohio. He finds that approximately 27% of the counties have both species of trees. Yellow birch only grows in 24 counties, and 1 out of 11 counties grows neither species. Okay. So, what can we do with this? Complete the table to show the relationship between the number of counties where sassafras trees grow and yellow birch trees grow. So, 27% of the counties have both species of trees, meaning that represents this box right here, where both yellow birch grow and sassafras. So we have to find out what 27% of 88 is. Okay? How can we do that? Well, we could go to Desmos. Again, easiest way to do this would be to do 27% of 88. 23.76. By the fact that this says approximately, and the fact that we can't have 0.76 of a county, we would want to round. Okay? So we're going to round up to the nearest county. So we're going to round this number either up or down based on the 10th digit. This 10th digit is 7. 5 or above gives it a shove, so that puts it to 24. That grows both. Then we have yellow birch, only grows in 24 counties. So we already have the 24 here, and that total is 24, meaning we can now find how many yellow birch grows in, but sassafras does not, of which it is 0. 1 out of 11 counties grows neither. So, this one we can set up a ratio. Okay? If 1 out of 11 grows neither, then how many of 88 is that? Well, 88 divided by 11 is 8. So you have to multiply by 8 to go from 11 to 88. So naturally, you would multiply this side by 8, and you would get 8. So 1 out of 11, or 8 out of 88, grows neither. And using this, everything else falls into place. 0 plus 8 is 8. That means that, let me see if I have another color that I can use to finish this off. No, I actually don't. That's fine. That is fine. 88 minus 8 is 80. 80 minus 24 would be 56. And 56 plus 8 would be 64. Just using those 3 clues, we were able to fill in that entire table. But again, it takes a little bit of logic. Two-way tables, like I said when we taught them originally, two-way tables are like a puzzle. If you're good at puzzles, you'll be good at two-way tables. If you struggle with puzzles, you might struggle a little bit with two-way tables, and that's fine. Okay? It's just, you just got to think. Okay? It's less math and more critical thinking and logic. Question 4. This item has 2 parts. This item has 2 parts means it's probably worth 2 points on the state test. 2 raw points, so good to know. Leroy asked 133 juniors and seniors at his school whether they drove to school or ride the bus to school. The results are given. 38 juniors ride the bus to school. There are 7 more juniors than seniors, and exactly 2/3 of the seniors drive to school. Complete the table. Okay. So, let's start with the first clue. 38 juniors ride the bus to school. That's already filled in for us. Huzzah. Then, there were 7 more juniors than seniors. This is what we can use to find how it goes. Okay? So we're going to have to set up an equation to solve this one out. If this is going to be 2 points, they're going to make you work for these 2 points. Let x equal seniors. And then there are 7 more juniors than there are seniors. So let x plus 7 equal juniors. Okay? So there are the seniors, and then there are 7 more people. That equals the juniors. Our total amount of people is 133. So x plus 7 equals 133. Now we have to solve. Okay? We could combine like terms. X plus x are like terms. That makes 2x plus 7 equals 133. Then you could subtract 7 from each side by using the addition property of equality. That leaves you with 2x equals 133 minus 7, which is 126. Divide both sides by 2. X equals 126 divided by 2 is 63. So that means that x, or seniors, are 63. And juniors, which is x plus 7, is 63 plus 7, which is 70. That solves that. Okay. Next. Exactly 2/3 of the seniors drive to school. So, we now know there are 63 seniors. So to find how many 2/3 is, you can use 63 times parentheses 2 over 3. Whoops. 2 over 3. And that tells you that there are 42 seniors who drive to school. Those are seniors who drive. So, we're now at the point where we can fill in the rest of the table with the information we have. 70 minus 38 gives me the remainder of juniors who drive to school. 70 minus 38 is 32. 32 plus 42 gives me the total amount of people who drive to school. 32 plus 42 is 74. 63 minus 42 gives me the amount of seniors who ride the bus to school. 63 minus 42 is 21. And 38 plus 21 gives me the total amount of people who ride the bus to school. 38 plus 21 is 59. And that's just part 1. Part 2. Select a phrase for each blank box to complete a true statement about the likelihood of juniors and seniors riding to school. Okay? The juniors are blank than the seniors, either equally likely to drive as, less likely to drive to school as, or more likely to drive to school as. The seniors because they have an equal, greater, or smaller relative frequency. Okay? So, relative frequency, you would have to compare the 32 juniors out of their 74 versus the 38 seniors out of their 59. Okay? 32 divided by 74 is 0.43 or 43%. And 38 out of 59 is 64.4 or 64%. So are juniors or seniors more likely to drive to school? Seniors. Because they have a greater relative frequency. And does that make sense logically? Yes. Typically, more seniors have their driver's license. Typically, more seniors have jobs that they can afford a car and insurance and all that fun stuff. Question 5. The frequency table shows some information about the interiors of cars and trucks at a dealership. How many trucks have leather seats? So they give us most of the table this time, which is great. We just got to fill it in. So remember, when we have a total and one of the digits, you can figure out what the other digit is by subtracting what you have from the total. 55 minus 21 is 34. That gives us how many cars have leather seats. Your total here also, 51 have cloth seats. Out of 100, 100 minus 51 means you have 49 remaining. And then, based on that, you could do 49 minus 34 to find out 15 trucks have leather seats. And oh, hey, wow, that's the question. How many trucks have leather seats? It's 15. Could you figure out that there were 30 trucks with cloth seats? You could. It's not needed. Once you got that 15, you're good. You could use that to check yourself. Because if this wasn't 30 and this was like 27, then this would have to be 18, and then you would have a problem. But it all matches up. Okay, question 6. Ava has a collection of 48 fiction books and 22 non-fiction books. She has 18 total books signed by the author, and there are 40 fiction books unsigned. Complete the two-way frequency table to show the number of each type of book in Ava's collection. Okay. So, they don't give us totals, but like I said, we're going to want to add totals because it makes it possible to fill in the rest of the table. Okay, so I'm going to make totals here. So here is total, and here is total. Okay. What do we know? She has a collection of 48 fiction books and 22 non-fiction books. So she has a total of 48 fiction books and 22 non-fiction books. She has 18 total books that are signed by the author. So, signed total 18. There are 40 books that are unsigned. 40 fiction books are unsigned. Now we need to fill in the rest of the table. Okay. Well, we can get the total amount of books by doing 48 plus 22. 48 plus 22 is 70. We can now get the total amount of books that are unsigned by doing 70 minus 18. 70 minus 18 is 52. With that information, we can now get the total amount of unsigned nonfiction books by doing 52 minus 40, which is 12. With that information, we can now get the total number of signed nonfiction books by doing 22 minus 12, which is 10. And using either this information or this information, you can get the total number of signed fiction books, which is either 18 minus 10 or 48 minus 40, both of which result to 8. Question 7. A survey of 680 households asked about cable television and video streaming service subscriptions. 540 households have a video streaming service. 80% of the households have cable television. And of the households with no cable television, 7 times as many have a streaming service as have no video streaming service. Complete the two-way table to summarize the data. Alright. So, 540 households have a video streaming service. That's already accounted for right here. 80% of total households have cable television. So we need 80% of 680. We're going to get that from Desmos. We're going to do 80% of 680, which is 544. That's the total amount of people who have cable television. Of the households with no cable television, 7 times as many have a streaming service as have no streaming service. So, we'll let X equal no stream. And we'll let 7x equal stream. Okay? Because of the households with no cable television, 7 times as many have a streaming service as have no streaming service. So these are the people who have no streaming service, is X, and then 7 times that X are the people who do. Problem is, we need to know how many people don't have cable television. Well, we can do that with 680 minus 544, which will give you 136. So now, of those 136, we have x plus 7x equals 136. You combine like terms, that gives you 8x equals 136, because 1 plus 7 is 8. And then you divide both sides by 8. We'll double check our math with Desmos. 136 divided by 8 is 17. So 17 don't have a streaming service, and 17 times 7 is 119, do have a streaming service. Now, with this information, we can now solve the rest of the problem. We can find the total number of people with no video streaming service by doing 680 minus 540. That's 140. We can now find the total amount of people, we can now find the amount of people who have cable television but no video streaming service by doing 140 minus 17, which is 123. And we can now find the total amount of people who have cable television with a video streaming service by either doing 540 minus 119 or 544 minus 123. Let's do 544 minus 123. That would be 421. And that is the final answer. Whew. So that's going to do it for two-way tables. Like I said, two-way tables is something you either love or you don't. I find very few people who are just kind of like, I'm alright with two-way tables. Usually it's either, wow, I'm really good with two-way tables, or wow, I really hate two-way tables. And there are going to be people of both types. So no matter what type you are, don't worry about it. We will get you through it if we need to. But until then, that's the end of this video. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me in class. And good luck on your state test.